Hey guys, how's it going? Srey here. So I just want to go over the Heroes of the Storm balance update for January 27th and kind of give you my thoughts and insight of what I think of the changes and what it means for you. Let's go to the first balance changes, and those first balance changes are Ragnaros. So the balance changes of Ragnaros are pretty much straight nerfs. Well, they are straight nerfs, and his biggest change here I think is the max health nerf. So from 2100 to 2000, and that's just gonna make you a little bit easier to kill. And coupled with these are basically all healing or regen nerfs. So Sulfurious obviously is a damage nerf, but it also reflects your healing because you heal from your Q. The less damage you do with your Q, the less healing you receive. So these are all healing nerfs, and they all go back to sustainability and survivability on Rag. So they aren't really nerfing um, what he can do in terms of damage and what he brings to a fight. You just have to play more carefully with Ragnaros, and you can't kind of just run in or you will get punished for it. And I think that's a good approach for it. I'd definitely be more than happy if they just left his health numbers and healing numbers and just started nerfing damage. Obviously, they did nerf damage a bit though with his Q. So this just means you're a little bit squishier. These base health regen nerfs are always just totally useless. Ignore those. Quest completion from 120 to 100. So instead of getting a total of 150 damage, you gain 130 damage after you complete the quest. And that's a nerf, but I'd still get this talent at level 1. The only other option I would suggest is looking at the increase in the decrease in cooldown for your E and increase in range. And catching fire got a nerf as well, so from 2 to 1.5 per regen globe. And so this lowers his regen and makes him a little bit the damage you stick onto him is a little bit more forgiving in terms of the player playing against him. And personally, I didn't really go this talent very often unless I was on a map that I could really get the globes quickly. And I prefer going the 40% slow on your E. And I think that's just generally a better option. At least I'm more comfortable playing with it. So personally, this doesn't affect me at all, but I know that most players do go catching fire. The interesting change here is cauterized wounds. So if you watch competitive at all, you know that the level 13 talent that when you get stunned, you take 50% less damage for 3 seconds is really OP. Like it's broken. And pretty much every competitive player has complained about it, but instead they go and nerf cauterized wounds, which has a higher win rate on hot slogs and probably internally as well, um, for the general public or for the general player base. And I understand I understand Blizzard's reasoning for the nerf, but I would also like to see them nerf the stun talent as well because I think the majority of players go cauterize wounds, so I don't think there's any harm for the player base as a whole to kind of nerf the other one, because I think that's where the problem really lies for why Rag is so strong. However, they did nerf, catching fire, sulfurous hungers, and obviously his base health is part of his kit anyway in competitive, so we'll see how that affects him because he's pretty much first picked, first banned every game. That's right now. I'm happy that the Blizzard didn't just go and straight up nerf his damage, nerf his kit, nerf Molten Core, and they instead went around to kind of reduce his survivability a bit. So he still has the same effect if you're playing him right, but you get punished a little bit harder if you aren't. For all those interesting changes here, as you know, the last patch or in a recent patch, they reduced the cooldown or they increased the cooldown, sorry, of Earthquake from 60 seconds to 100 seconds, which was a huge nerf, and it basically made Thrall from being in basically every single game to not in every single game, but still played. And they've further gone and reduced the cooldown from 70 or the slow amount from 70 to 50. So if you've ever played against Thralls, I'm sure you probably have, and you played against Earthquake, you know that that slow is incredibly 70% is a huge slow. And 50% is still big, but not quite as huge. I don't know if I agree with this because Earthquake is a 100-second cooldown, so the ability should feel impactful. I think maybe a 60% cooldown or more, because obviously Earthquake procs in waves, so it's not just a steady 10-second slow or something or 8 second. It procs in waves, so maybe a bit more time in between waves for your character to react to the next incoming slow. I don't know if I agree with just a straight reduction in the slow from 70 to 50. With the sundering change that you see here, so reducing the cooldown from 80 to 70, and the previous patch where the Sunder was increased in damage and buffed, I feel like we're going to go back to a meta where sundering is the only option, or the only picked talent, and I would have preferred for Thrall to have two equally good level 10 heroics that were picked basically on which one is better given the situation. So I feel like we're going to go back to just picking Sunder. Um, but I could be wrong. Maybe we'll still see play from Earthquake, but I feel like 100-second cooldown for 50% slow probably isn't worth it. Zul'jin got some changes where they've effectively nerfed the talents that were taken and buffed the talents that weren't. Um, the nerfs aren't that significant, but the buffs are pretty good. So you can see they reduced the mana cost of Twin Cleave from 60 to 50. That's a nice change. Guillotine's cooldown was reduced from 45 to 30. That's a really, really, really big cooldown reduction. 45 to 30-second cooldown on Heroic is insane. That's really, really strong. I think Li Ming's cooldown, I can't remember on Heroic, is either 10, 20 or 30 seconds. So it's Guillotine does a lot of damage if you're on low health. And I think that this change will actually make it a viable talent. 30-second cooldown is no joke for what Guillotine is. So, and with Tazingo being a 90-second cooldown, I feel like there's definitely viability here. So at level 1, they've increased the bonus damage of Bone Slicer, which wasn't taken. Arcana Axes got a buff as well, wasn't taken. So you want Axe was the option at level 1, and they've reduced the damage that it gives from 1.5 to 1.25, but it's still obviously really, really good, and I would still be taking this talent. It also gives you the range increase, which is really important. Again, Let the Killing Begins is with the standard talent level 4, and it still is 15 seconds to 12 seconds. So let's say that the buff duration lasted 60 seconds, okay, and they reduce it to 50 seconds. Like it doesn't matter. Even though it was 60 seconds and they reduced it to 12 seconds, that is now. Even though that's a huge reduction, 15 seconds was just so ridiculously long before that you would basically never lose the buff in a team fight. So I'm not really. This doesn't really affect you at all. 12 seconds is still long. This is just a buff here for this talent. Voodoo Shuffle was absolutely awful. I still don't think it's good, but now it's a little bit shorter cooldown. Ferocity was the standard level 16 for the most part as well, and they've reduced the attack speed from 40 to 35. Again, not really substantial. So Sagara here got straight buffs. If you remember Zagara, she used to be played all the time. She was one of, or if not the strongest hero in the game, just for consistency's sake on pretty much every map as well. And they nerfed her a lot in several different ways, and she hasn't seen play for quite a while because of those nerfs. And I don't think that these buffs change anything. So movement speed has been increased, and they've reduced the cooldown of Creep Tumor, and they've increased the damage in W. I don't think these changes are nearly enough for her to see play again, especially with how strong all the frontline is at the moment. So I don't think that Zagara is good enough to see consistent play. Obviously, you can play her, but I don't think she's competitive viable. Uther gains 10 armor. This does nothing. So he can play more aggressive, but I mean, an aggressive Uther, Uther doesn't do damage. The problem with Uther is that he's good in a kind of a meta where the enemy team has a lot of bursts because he has Divine Shield, and this just isn't a meta for Uther. So it's not that Uther himself is a bad hero, it's that this meta makes Uther really bad because Uther does nothing to 2 or 3 tanks, like triple or double or triple tank. He does nothing versus that, and he has no sustain against that either. So Malfurion has an AoE root, a ranged AoE root, and Uther has a single target melee stun. So the Malfurion is just much stronger. Malfurion has way better healing. Malfurion has better wave clear. Malfurion has a better passive for the most part. He can give his allies mana. It's more consistent anyway. Maybe Uther has a better passive, but it depends on the situation. They both have great ults, but I feel like uh, Malfurions are better. I just feel like Malfurion's better in pretty much every way. If you want CC from a support, I feel like a root is good enough. And an AoE root, an AoE ranged root is really good. And just having, if you're running like 3 tanks, you don't want another melee in your team. You want a ranged, and Uther is another melee. So this armor doesn't fix the problems that Uther has right now. Artanis got some changes. These are interesting changes. I don't really understand them. So Artanis is obviously a very, very strong hero, and at least in competitive, he's pretty much perma-picked, perma-banned, almost more so than Ragnaros. And these changes are almost a joke. So shield bonus reduced from 80 to 75. Like, I literally don't understand the purpose of this change. Why? This is so insignificant. If you want to nerf it, nerf it. 5% change is nothing. Why even go about calculating this change, thinking about it, and then putting it into patch notes? I don't understand changes like this. The only thing I can think of is that people reading this in the public respond to Artanis nerf. He's bad, don't play as much. And then that kind of reduces the problem in itself just by saying Artanis is nerfed, regardless of how much he was nerfed. So this change could be, 1%, and it could still be a nerf. 5% could still be a nerf, or 40% could be a nerf. So all those are technically nerfs, but if someone, I don't know, just someone reading this might think that, okay, he got nerfed, so I'm not going to play him anymore. And some people really just have that mentality. So maybe that's what Blizzard's going for, and they think it'll fix itself on its own. They like how Artanis is now at kind of higher levels of play, and they feel like if they nerf this, then the general public will think that he's not as good and not play him, and then they won't have to nerf him for high level play, but he'll still be viable at lower level play. I don't know. At level 7, this talent wasn't taken that often, but it's obviously always been considered a very strong talent. So Chrono Surge and I don't remember what the name was, but the slow talent level 7, where you swap and they're slowed by 30% for 4 seconds or something. Those two talents were the only ones taken. The other one mostly was taken. This one wasn't, but is already really strong. The problem with at level 7 isn't that this talent wasn't good enough, it was that the other one is too strong, but they've instead opted to buff this talent instead of nerf the other one. So I don't know. He's just so far he's better. Templar Zeal got a straight buff, and Graviton Vortex got a nerf here, so from 6 to 5 second cooldown reduction. And that again doesn't really matter. It's only a 1 second difference, and the important part of Graviton Vortex isn't really the cooldown reduction, although that's an important part. It's that it's a double swap. So far these changes are a buff. The only significant change here is the change to Titan Killer. So instead of, if you get triple strike, instead of hitting for 7.5% of a target's max health, you'll hit for 6%. And what this means is that the amplified damage is usually just the better option. You're better off going, um, you're most of the time, if you're not against like triple tank, you're better off going Graviton Vortex at 13, and then the amplified damage at the vulnerability or whatever it's called at level 16, instead of going for triple strike and Titan Killer. And then this talent got a buff, but if you watch my tennis video, you'll know why this talent isn't very good. The damage is insane on this talent, but you'll basically just never have it up because you need your shields up, and your shields are too low to gain benefit. Diablo got some interesting changes as well. Lightning Breath got quality of life changes, so the damage reduced from 100 to 50. Oh no, it's crap. But damage effects per second increased from 2 to 4. And this means the damage is exactly the same. It just ticks a little bit faster, and this basically just gives the user a better feel when using Lightning Breath. The buff here is increased turn rate by 25%, and this makes it so that you can kind of just turn more quickly and hit the target you want to hit. So this is overall a significant buff to Lightning Breath. Well, not significant, but it's a buff to Lightning Breath. From the shadows here this is a nerf for the talent, so increase the range from 33 to 40. However, if you hit a target into a wall, it would stun them for an additional 0.5 seconds, and they've removed that and just opted to basically give your Q range instead of the stun as well. This is a nerf. I think that I don't really see a situation where you need the range anymore, because if the range is so far that you can barely catch an enemy, you're going to Q in, flip them, and then die because you're so overextended on Diablo. Maybe in some situations versus like a medic comp where the whole team can follow up if you dive because you build your team like that, but I don't see this being a good option at level 4 anymore. I think that the only I think the overpower and then you slow the target after you overpower for 3 seconds is better, or increase movement speed when you're stunned or rooted is better at level 4 now. At level 13, both these talents, so Hellfire was just bad. It would never be taken before. I'm not sure if it's now viable. They only increase the damage from by like 2%, and that's not very significant at all. So I still don't think this is the better talent between this one and Hellfire, which basically do AoE damage. Fire Devil, they reduced the single target damage, which is your basic attack damage increase from 25 to 20, but they didn't touch the immolation effect. So Hellfire is slightly better, Fire Devil basically the same, and at least in competitive play, I would get or the standard is going the percentage health damage. So when you stun target into a wall, they take percentage damage, and it would do up to 15% of the target's max health. And if you have the domination talent at level 16, you could stun, flip, stun, and do 30% of the target's max health on top of the damage you already do, which is really insane. So most of the time on Diablo, I'll get that talent, but both these talents are Fire Devil is good, and Hellfire might be playable now. So Domination is the biggest nerf to Diablo here, and what they've done is this talent used to also give cooldown reduction, 4 seconds off overpower, and that was really good. They removed that and they basically made it so the only thing that domination does is when you Q a target, you can Q them, E, and then Q back. So you can Q target back into your team, and that's the only benefit you're going to gain. So you basically gain an extra Q. And this is still a good talent. I think it's probably the standard at level 16 still. But the other talents, like the damage reduction talent at 16, might be a better option in some situations. Hellgate got nerfed. It was basically both of the storm on a slightly shorter range, but it also procced an apocalypse when you use it, and so I can see why this is getting nerfed. And it's understandable nerf, so I don't really have anything to say about this. It's still a good talent. You should still take it. Sonya, these are the most interesting changes in my opinion. So for this change, for these changes, so whirlwind damage increased by over 100, which is a lot. Like that is a huge damage increase, especially since she's had her damage at that level for quite a while. This is a huge damage increase. And then they increased her healing from 20 to 25% of damage done, and that's tripled versus heroes. So before it'd be 60% of damage done versus heroes, and now it's 75%. So that's a big difference. And the damage is significantly increased here. So this is a huge change, especially in this meta where there are so many melee heroes. I think that Sonya will really, really shine. I think this is the biggest change of this patch. It'll bring Sonya into the meta. Um, Poison Spear, seems kind of random. They just buffed this talent. But okay, it's buffed. I don't know if it'll be viable enough because there's still follow through and the healing at level 7, so I don't know if this is good enough. But I mean, 100 to 150% damage is quite a lot, so we'll see. And life funnel changes. So from this talent was previously 30% when this was 20%, so now it's 35%. Well, this is 25%. So you can, if you get life funnel with these buffs, that's a huge amount of HP that you're going to be healing for. 105% of damage done is healed. Then we have Stitches changes. So Stitches has his health increased again. So he has by far the most health in the game, maybe besides Cho'Gall, or just Cho, I guess. And his health regen is increased. So his health regen, again, totally irrelevant. But this health buff is nice. So I don't like this change because the problem with Stitches isn't that he doesn't have enough health. Okay, so if you make Stitches have 10,000 health, he's going to be viable, right? If you make any hero have 10,000 health, they're going to be viable. If you just keep buffing the raw damage numbers, like if Gazlo's auto attacks suddenly hit for 700 each, okay, he's going to be viable. Okay, but that's not the right way of buffing the character. I feel like there's issues with Stitch's kit as a whole. He's really boring to play, and he has no kind of the only thing that he has is his hook, right? And that's a great ability. I think the hook is a great ability, but his slam is just an AoE cone damage that does very little damage, and his E just heals himself. Like, there's no fun to playing it at all. There's no intricacies. You just land hook, and that's it. With level 10, you have Gorge and you have Bile, which are both great heroics, but they don't those like you have hook and then you have gorge, or you have hook and you have bile, and that's like his whole kit. It's just really, really boring. Once you get level 16, and you put some talents into W becomes a little more useful with the slow. But just right now, like I don't like the way Stitches works. I don't like that they're just buffing health to make him viable. Like this might very well make him a playable pick because right now he isn't. But I don't think this is the right way of going about it. Zarya is nerfed again, so more Zarya nerfs. Again, these changes are pretty insignificant. So from 21 to 20, that's like what, less than 5%, probably less than 5% for this too. And um, you have to remember, of course, that Zarya does up to 200% more damage, which is energy, which is 3 times as much damage. So these changes are multiplied, and of course you skill per level. So these numbers mean a lot more than what they're just given on screen here. But it's 5% damage buff, basically less than 5%. So it's not too significant. Uh, the change here is energy globes reduced, gives you reduced energy now. So instead of giving you 20, they give you 15. At least in North America anyway, it was standard to go Demolitions Expert at level 1, which reduces the cooldown of your particle grenades. So it reduces the cooldown from 8 seconds to 4 seconds, and increases the radius when you stack it, and it's really easy to stack. So that was the primary talent going at level 1. In EU or other regions, it might be different, but I would not be worried about this change at all for the average player. Of course, you have to take into account that that is competitive, and most competitive players take that talent, and most non-competitive players take maximum charge. So the reason that Blizzard nerfed maximum charge is because most people go maximum charge, and it's really easy to use because it's not. It basically makes the energy management from Zarya non-existent, or it really reduces the the skill in using it, because try playing if you play Zarya right now and you take energy talents, so the extra energy at 7 and maximum charge at 1, and I think there's a few others. If you take those talents now, you're going the wrong build, okay? But it's okay because it's going to be more effective for you than using a different build, because energy management on Zarya is difficult for someone who's not experienced, and it's difficult if your team doesn't coordinate as well. So when you're playing competitive, you can just have your ally walk into a tower and take damage and then build a shield, or you walk into a tower, take damage and build a shield, or you intentionally walk into abilities to generate energy. And it's a lot easier to keep your energy up when you have allies coordinating with you. But also, if you're not always hitting that shield right on time and getting the full energy value of it on yourself or an ally, you're just not going to have enough energy to do any damage. So if you're getting maximum charge, it's perfectly fine to get maximum charge and energy talents if you're still new with Zarya or you aren't comfortable with the amount of energy that you have, because you should be maximum energy in team fights, whether or not you have that talent. And if you need that talent to give you max energy, then take that talent. But it's optimal to get to a point where you don't need those talents. So you can instead take other talents to build energy for your team. And after this, these are just bug changes and fixes. That's pretty much this patch. So I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and I will see you guys next time.